This week I made a custom white epoxy cutting board out of maple. I started with the cutoffs of these two maple slabs that I was using for a coffee table. I then squared off one edge on my table saw using my miter gauge before ripping them down to 1.5 inch strips. I needed some edge pieces for the river, so I milled up this beautiful piece of curly maple for my wood pile. I started by using my power plane to get the piece as flat as I could on one side before using my jointer plane to get it perfectly flat. I then cleaned up the other side quickly using my power plane before sending it through my planer. I squared off all the ends and cut all the pieces to the same length on my miter saw. I then glued together all the pieces using Titebond 3, which is a waterproof glue. I made up a mold using melamine from a previous project and lined the inside using paste wax. I'll leave a detailed video in the description if you want to learn how to make one. I used this epoxy from Rusty Design Canada, pouring it in 2 layers. After about 24 hours, or until the first layer is tacky on the top, I poured the second layer. If you wait longer, wait until the first layer is completely hardened and scuff it up with some sandpaper before pouring the second layer. After removing the cutting board from the mold, I used my router sled to flatten the top. I then sanded the top with 100 grit before mixing up a small batch of epoxy to fill any imperfections.
But I don't know why I said goodbye, 'cause I can't do this. Every now and then I see you there, dancing on the floor like you don't care. Then your eyes meet mine and both our minds say I can't do this. Now I'm seeing double, 'cause I can take the trouble.
After the epoxy had completely hardened, I sanded the entire board to 100 grit again. I then added a small bevel to the top edge around the entire perimeter. I then sanded the entire board from 120 all the way to 320 grit. In order to get the best results, it's important to keep your sandpaper as clean as possible. This is done using a microfiber towel to remove any excess dust on the surface of the cutting board, and a vacuum or air compressor to remove dust directly from the sandpaper. Because the cutting board was sealed on the bottom with epoxy, it caused it to cup. In order to remove this, I wiped on some water with a cloth and flipped it over on a piece of plastic. This water made the wood on this side expand, flattening out the board. It also helped by raising the grain of the cutting board, which is an important step so that your cutting board does not turn rough after its first use. After letting the cutting board completely dry, I sanded the entire board with 400 grit sandpaper. I repeat this process of wetting the entire board, letting it dry, sanding with 400 2 more times. I then applied 3 coats of cutting board oil, which is a food-safe mineral oil. I did this by applying the oil to the entire cutting board, waiting for it to dry for at least 20 minutes before removing it with a clean cloth, then repeating this process 3 times. I recently started purchasing a bunch of tools that can be used to build this project all the way up to full-size dining tables. This is because I'll be moving into a new space over the winter, and I'm super excited for all the videos I'll be able to make there. Please let me know if you'd like to see a video on all the tools I've bought and why I chose them.
I've been all in my bag, you been all in my business, you be all in your feelings, I've been all in them trenches, I've been all in my bag.
I hope you enjoyed watching me build this custom epoxy cutting board. If you did, please consider subscribing to help support the channel.
I've been all in my bag, you been all in my business, you be all in your feelings, I've been all in them